My dad lied to his new wife about my inheritance. Let her treat me like a guest, so I changed the locks and made them leave my house. My name's Ellie, and I'm 22 years old. What I'm about to tell you isn't some made-up family drama. It's my life. I never thought I'd find myself posting something like this here. But hey, life's funny like that. To really understand the chaos that went down, you need to know a bit of my backstory. My mom, Sarah, was the strongest woman I knew. She was a planner, down to the tiniest details of life. She worked as a senior accountant and was the kind of person who had everything neatly filed and sorted receipts, life insurance policies, you name it. She even wrote out a whole will years before she got sick. I used to think it was a little weird, but I get it now. She always said, I want to make sure you're okay no matter what. Mom passed away from intestinal cancer when I was 18. I don't know if any of you have dealt with something like that, but watching someone you love slowly deteriorate is devastating. She fought so hard for 4 years, though, and never once complained. She quit her job to focus on treatment, and somehow, through everything, she kept planning, making sure all the paperwork for the house, finances, and my future were solid. Before she passed, she sat me down and said, Ellie, this house is yours now. It's your home, and I want you to keep it. Promise me you'll always take care of it. I was so young at the time, just weeks away from starting college. I barely understood how any of it worked, but I knew one thing. That house was the last piece of her. My mom bought it before she even met my dad. She worked hard for it, paid off the mortgage, and built a beautiful life for us there. She made sure it would go to me, no one else. Here's where my dad comes into the picture. My parents divorced when I was 9. There was no big dramatic fallout, no custody battle, no fights over property. My dad just left. He met someone else, Diane, and decided he wanted a new life with her. He remarried pretty quickly and had my half-sister, Maya. To be fair, Dad did one thing right. He paid for my college up front by putting money into a separate account that was his version of child support, I guess. I wasn't angry back then. I just sort of accepted that I wasn't part of his new family anymore. I'd visit them sometimes during the holidays. Diane was never outright mean to me, but it was obvious she didn't really see me as family. She'd do that thing where she'd invite me for dinner but act like she hoped I'd say no. Ellie, you're welcome to join us for dinner, she'd say in this overly cheerful voice while stirring a pot of something. It felt so forced that it made my skin crawl. Dad, meanwhile, was always working to provide for his new family. Maya was about 10 years younger than me, and while I tried to bond with her, I always felt like a guest whenever I was at their house. You know when you're somewhere and you just know you don't belong. That's how it felt. They lived in a rented house back then. Nothing fancy, but comfortable enough. Anyway, when Mom passed, I had no idea how to handle the house. Too numb to think straight. Dad and Diane came over right after the funeral, and to my surprise, they offered to help me out. Dad said, Ellie, you can't live alone right now. It's too much to handle. Let us stay here for the summer, and we'll help take care of everything. While you figure things out, I didn't argue. I was a mess. I had just lost my mom, my anchor, and the thought of being alone in that big, quiet house scared me. Diane put on her best sympathetic face, acting like she was there for me, while Maya wandered through the house like it was a playground. I remember sitting in Mom's office, my office, now staring at her degrees on the wall and her neatly arranged financial books. She had worked so hard to make sure I'd have a home, and yet I couldn't even bring myself to touch her things. I let Dad and Diane move into the spare room and Maya into what used to be Mom's craft room. By the end of the summer, I was getting ready to leave for college out of state. That's when Dad brought up the idea of them staying permanently. Over breakfast one morning, he pushed his coffee aside and said, Ellie, what if we... He paused, then reassured me. I stayed here while you were at school, so you wouldn't have to worry about bills, maintenance, or the house sitting empty. It'll be good for all of us. Diane chimed in, flipping pancakes at the stove. We take care of everything, Ellie. The house will be in perfect shape when you come home. At the time, it made sense. They'd been decent housemates over the summer. Diane had even softened up a bit. She'd cook meals for me and invite me to her weird little book club meetings where middle-aged women gushed over bad romance novels. Maya started calling me her cool sister, which I'll admit warmed my heart a little. So I agreed. I didn't see any harm in it. I trusted them. Over the next 4 years, I came home for breaks and holidays. And honestly, it was okay. Diane would cook huge welcome home dinners. Dad would crack stupid dad jokes. And Maya would show me her latest middle school drama. I started to believe we had turned into this strange but functional blended family. Sure, there were little things, like Diane rearranging furniture or making subtle comments about the house, but I shrugged them off. It wasn't worth making waves. When I called Dad my senior year of college to tell him I'd accepted a job back in my hometown, he seemed thrilled. "That's great, Ellie. We'll have the house ready for you." I didn't think twice about it. I graduated, packed up my stuff, and made the long trip home, excited to start this new chapter. I should have known something was wrong when the taxi pulled up to the house and I noticed new curtains in the windows. Little things had changed. The rose bushes Mom planted were still there, but they were pruned differently. The front porch looked repainted. I didn't think much of it until I walked up to the door, pulled out my key, and it didn't fit. That's when everything started to unravel. I'll never forget the exact moment I realized something was seriously wrong. The taxi dropped me off on a warm, sunny afternoon. Felt like such a perfect day to be starting fresh. I was 22 in hand, job secured, and ready to move back into the house that I thought would always be mine. I even remember taking a moment to stand in front of the house, suitcase in hand, breathing in that weird mix of roses and fresh-cut grass. Mom's rose bushes were still there, though someone had trimmed them differently, like the rounded way Diane always shaped things. It was little details like that I noticed first subtle changes. I walked up to the porch, pulled out my house key, slid it into the lock, already picturing my first night back in my room. I'd spent the whole car ride imagining throwing my stuff on my bed, unpacking a bit, and sleeping like a rock after the long trip. But the key didn't turn. I tried again, nothing. I froze mid-breath, just staring at the door, wondering if maybe I'd forgotten how locks worked. I jiggled the key and turned it harder. Still nothing. No way, I thought. Maybe I'm overtired, or maybe the lock's jammed. I knocked on the door, still half smiling, still hopeful. A moment later, Diane opened it, wearing an apron and looking like she'd just been baking, flour smudges on her hands. For half a second, her face went totally blank. Then she pasted on this fake smile and said, "Ellie, what are you doing here?" That question hit me like a slap. What was I doing here? I live here. Or at least I thought I did. I managed to stammer out, I'm moving back home. I told you guys about this, remember?" Her smile faltered. "Oh, right," she said, like she just remembered something she'd forgotten to put on the grocery list. She stepped aside reluctantly and let me in. The moment I rolled my suitcase, inside it was like stepping into a weird version of my house. The living room was different. Mom's furniture was still there, but it had been rearranged. Diane's tacky farmhouse decor, fake plants, and cutesy signs that said things like live, laugh, love had taken over the mantel and the shelves. The old photo of Mom and me on the side table was gone. A new family photo of Dad, Diane, and Maya was there instead. I swallowed hard, my throat tight, but I tried to stay calm. In the living room, Dad was sitting in Mom's old armchair, the one she used to curl up in with a book after work. He looked up from his tablet and did this awkward double take when he saw me. "Hey, you're back," Dad said, sounding like he was trying way too hard to sound cheerful. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a small smile. "Why are the locks changed?" Dad asked, scratching the back of his neck as his face clouded with uncertainty. My old nervous habit kicked in, and I felt that familiar flutter in my stomach. I changed the locks last month after a couple of break-ins in the neighborhood, for safety. You didn't think to give me a new key? My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I was already feeling uncomfortable about the whole situation. Diane, who was hovering behind me, jumped in. "We didn't think you'd be here so soon." "I graduated last week," I said, looking between them. "I told you guys I'd be moving back home for my job. I literally sent you the date I'd be here." Diane didn't respond. She just crossed her arms and stared at me like I was the one who'd done something wrong. Dad stood up and gestured toward the office. "Ellie, can we talk privately for a second?" I followed him, suitcase still in hand, my heart pounding. Mom's old office looked more or less the same, although I noticed some of her books had been pushed aside for Diane's stuff. Dad shut the door behind us, and when he turned to face me, I saw it he was nervous, like he already knew what he was about to say would piss me off. "Listen," he started, his voice low. "There's something I need to tell you." Those words made my stomach drop. Dad hesitated, his hands twitching at his sides. "Diane, she thinks this house is mine, that I let you live here after your mom passed." I stared at him, not comprehending. He sighed, looking at the floor. "I never told her the truth that your mom bought the house and left it to you. I told her I gave it to your mom after the divorce and that it reverted to me when she passed." I couldn't speak. Staring at him, feeling like the air had been knocked out of me. My house, my mom's house, the one thing she fought so hard to make sure I'd have, and he lied about it to Diane for 4 years. "I had too, Ellie," Dad continued, still not meeting my eyes. "You don't understand what it's like. Diane wouldn't have agreed to live here if she thought it wasn't mine." I found my voice again, though it came out shaky. "So what? You let her think she owns my house, and now I'm supposed to just disappear?" He grabbed my arm, pleading. No, it's not like that. Just give me a little time to fix this. I'll tell her the truth, I promise. Just not yet. I don't want to ruin my marriage, please." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own father was asking me to lie, to let them stay in my house. The house my mom worked her whole life to buy because he was too much of a coward to admit the truth to his wife. I took the keys he handed me for the new locks, but I was done. I felt sick. I felt betrayed, but mostly I felt like an idiot for trusting them. I agreed to let him fix it, but deep down, I already knew this wasn't going to end well. That night, at dinner, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Diane sat at the head of the table, smiling like nothing was wrong, but I caught her glancing at me every now and then with sharp, calculating looks that made my skin crawl. Maya ignored me completely, and Dad barely spoke. I picked up my food, my mind spinning. This was only the beginning. I could feel it. You know how sometimes people don't have to say anything outright for you to know exactly how they feel about you. That's what living with Diane turned into: constant, unspoken hostility wrapped in fake politeness. Dad was no better. He avoided me completely, as though ignoring the situation would make it disappear. It felt as if I'd walked into someone else's house and overstayed my welcome, except it was my house. The first few days were awkward but tolerable. I spent most of my time in my room, unpacking my stuff, catching up with old friends over texts, and trying to process everything. Dad had told me the tension wasn't as bad at first. It felt more like that quiet kind where you can feel people watching you. Diane would pop into the kitchen while I was making coffee and make passive remarks like, "Oh, you're up early. You must be on a college schedule still. Or are you cooking for yourself tonight? I didn't realize you'd be eating in." The thing is, she wasn't yelling, but every comment carried an undertone that screamed, "You don't belong here." Then things escalated fast. On a Wednesday morning, I was about to throw in a load of laundry. I'd left my clothes sorted in the laundry room and went to grab detergent. By the time I got back, Diane was already pulling my clothes out of the washer and tossing them into a basket, mixing my clean shirts with a pile of dark laundry that hadn't even been washed yet. I froze and just watched her for a second. She said, as if she'd only just noticed me, "I thought this was Maya's basket. You really should label your stuff." "They were sorted," I said flatly. "And Maya doesn't do her own laundry, does she?" Her smile was razor thin. Well, I can't keep track of everyone's mess around here. She picked up her cup of tea and walked out, leaving my clothes in a crumpled pile. I knew what she was doing. She wanted me to react, to cause a scene, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. That night at dinner, she made just enough food for 3 people. I didn't realize it until I came to the table and saw 3 plates set, one for her, one for Dad, and one for Maya. She looked up at me and said, "Oh, Ellie, I thought you were eating out tonight." "You didn't say anything." "I live here," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You didn't ask." She shrugged and smiled, a fake sweetness to it. "Well, there's bread in the pantry if you're hungry." I sat there for a second, considering walking out or even flipping out on her. But instead, I just grabbed my coat and left. I couldn't stand sitting across from them for another second. I ended up at the local diner, eating a sandwich alone, and texting one of my old friends from high school. "Please tell me you're free tomorrow. I need to get out of the house." The next day, I reconnected with my friend Emily. She still lived nearby, and when I told her about the situation, she gave me that wide-eyed look you give someone when you can't believe what you're hearing. "Wait, they're living in your house, acting like you're the guest." "Ellie, what the hell?" "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Dad's too much of a coward to tell Diane the truth, and she's trying to make my life miserable. I feel like I'm losing my mind." We spent the afternoon hanging out, catching up on life, and for a few hours, I almost felt like myself again. Emily even joked, "If she keeps pushing, I'll come over and put her in her place for you." It made me laugh, but when I got home, the dread came rushing back. The house was dark and silent. I flicked on the hallway light and noticed something odd. My shoes, which I'd left neatly by the door, had been moved into the coat closet. It was a small thing, but it sent a clear message Diane didn't want any trace of me visible in her space. Over the next week, she doubled down. I'd wake up to find my things moved around, like my coffee mug mysteriously shoved to the back of the cabinet, or my mail accidentally tossed into a pile of junk. One morning, I went to take a shower only to realize the hot water was ice cold. Mia had conveniently taken a 45-minute shower right before me. Diane made a show of saying, "Oh, Ellie, I guess you'll just have to get up earlier." Mia's growing, and she takes longer these days. The worst part was watching Maya change. When we were younger, she used to follow me around like a little shadow. She'd call me her big sister and beg me to braid her hair. Now she rolled her eyes whenever I walked into the room and muttered things like, "She's so lazy, Mom." I even overheard her on the phone saying, "I don't know why she's still here. It's not even her house." That hurt more than I care to admit. And then there was Dad. I swear I could feel him avoiding me. He'd come home late, or go for walks, any time Diane started needling me in front of him. If I caught him alone and tried to talk about it, he'd just mumble something about keeping the peace. Keeping the peace for who? I hit my breaking point when Diane moved Mom's favorite vase. It had been on the mantel for as long as I could remember, this beautiful ceramic vase with blue flowers painted on it. One day, I came home and found it shoved onto a random shelf in the corner. Almost hidden in its place was one of Diane's tacky rustic pieces, an ugly wooden sign that said, "Home Sweet Home." I asked her about it directly. "Why did you move the vase?" "Oh," she said, not even looking up from her tablet. "I just thought it didn't match the new style I'm going for." "In here? I'm sure you understand." I didn't reply, but I felt something snap inside me. That vase was more than just decor. It was a piece of my mom, a memory of her, and Diane had no right to touch it. That night, I started packing up Diane's things in my head. Even though I wasn't ready to act, I knew deep down I couldn't keep living like this. By the time Saturday morning rolled around, it felt like I was living in someone else's house, an unwelcome guest in my own home. The hostility from Diane had grown so thick that even walking into the kitchen felt like stepping into enemy territory. I avoided the common spaces whenever she or Maya were around, just to keep my sanity. That morning, though, something was off. I woke up to silence, total silence. There was no sound of Diane banging pots in the kitchen, no Maya blasting pop music from her room, and no Dad watching the morning news on TV. It was eerie. At first, I thought maybe they had just gone out for breakfast or something, but the house felt abandoned. It was too clean. The kitchen counters were spotless, the dining table was empty, and even the shoes that were always cluttered near the front door were gone. I stood there barefoot and still in my pajamas, my stomach sinking. I checked my phone, nothing. No texts, no missed calls. I tried calling Dad first, but it went straight to voicemail. That's weird. I tried again, but it was the same result. By this point, I felt like something wasn't right. Maybe it was paranoia after weeks of tension with Diane, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a regular Saturday morning. Finally, I dialed Diane's number. I was about to hang up after the fourth ring when she picked up. Voice was sharp. "What do you want?" Her tone caught me completely off guard. I just wanted to know where everyone is. I woke up, and the house is empty. She laughed a mean, ugly sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, didn't we tell you? We're in the Maldives. You know? Sunny beaches, luxury resorts, the whole deal." I blinked, gripping the phone tighter. "The Maldives. First-class flights and everything," she added with mock cheer. "We didn't mention it because, frankly, we didn't want you tagging along. You're not exactly in a position to pay your way, are you?" My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" That's when she dropped the act completely. "I'm talking about you living in our house like some entitled brat," she spat. "Your father might be too soft to say it, but I'm not. You're a freeloader. Ellie, you've been mooching off us long enough. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a grown woman squatting in our house while we're paying all the bills?" I could barely breathe. My hands were shaking, and I sank into one of the kitchen chairs, my legs too weak to hold me up. "It's not your house," I managed to choke out. "It's my house." She ignored me. "We're done, Ellie. When we get back, I want you gone. I don't care where you go sleep on a park bench, for all I care, but you're not staying here. If you're still in that house when we come back, I'll personally throw you out." In the background, I could hear Maya laughing and Dad saying something I couldn't quite make out. The sound twisted the knife deeper. "Diane, don't bother trying to call your father," she interrupted, her voice icy. "He agrees with me. He's just too weak to tell you himself. We've already blocked your number. Have a nice life, Ellie." And then she hung up. I sat there in shock, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I stared at the phone, half expecting her to call back and say it was some cruel joke, but she didn't. My father's silence on the other end had confirmed everything. They were gone on vacation, living it up on a tropical island while I sat alone in what was supposed to be my house. The worst part, they planned to throw me out when they got back. For the first few minutes, I just sat there, my mind blank. I couldn't process it. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that my own father had let this happen. He didn't stop her. He didn't stand up for me. He just went along with it. But the shock didn't last long. It turned into something else, something I hadn't felt in weeks. Rage. They wanted me gone. Fine. But they'd forgotten one very important thing. This was my house. I spent the next hour sitting in that chair, staring at the walls and replaying the conversation in my head. Diane's voice echoed over and over: freeloader, squatter, embarrassing. It wasn't just what she said, but the way she said it, like I was some useless parasite clinging to their perfect lives, like I didn't belong here. Well, I wasn't going to let her win. By noon, I had a plan. First things first, I blocked their numbers. I didn't want to hear a word from any of them, not even Dad. Then I called a locksmith for emergency service. The guy asked when I explained what I needed. "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. As soon as possible, the locksmith arrived that afternoon. He was an older guy with kind eyes who didn't ask too many questions. He changed every lock in the house, front door, back door, garage door, you name it. It cost me more than I wanted to spend, but at that point, I didn't care. "Does anyone else have keys to these doors?" he asked as he handed me the new set. "Not anymore," I replied. Once the locks were changed, I grabbed some garbage bags and boxes and started packing up their stuff. I was done pretending that everything was fine. If Diane and Dad thought They could waltz back into my house after treating me like garbage. They were in for a surprise. I went room by room, packing Diane's expensive clothes and fancy bathroom products, cluttering up the counters into a bag. I boxed up Maya's toys, school supplies, and whatever else she'd left lying around. Dad's golf clubs, the ones he never used but always bragged about, went straight into the garage. By the time I finished, the sun was setting, and the garage was packed full of their things. It was exhausting, but it felt good, like I was reclaiming what was mine, piece by piece. I sat on the couch that night, staring at the clean, empty space that had been taken over for years. It felt strange quiet, but it also felt like home again. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in forever. I brewed myself a cup of coffee, sat in Mom's old chair, and watched the sunlight stream through the window. I knew this was just the beginning. Diane wasn't going to let this go without a fight. And Dad, well, I didn't know what to expect from him anymore. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going anywhere. It was a Friday evening when the storm hit. I'd been expecting it, honestly. I spent the whole week mentally preparing for the explosion that was bound to happen once they came back and saw what I'd done. I even rehearsed what I'd say over and over again so I wouldn't stumble or give them a chance to manipulate me. That afternoon, I came home from work, dropped my bag by the door, and noticed how quiet the house was. It wasn't the eerie, empty quiet I had felt that morning after Diane's call. No, this was the kind of quiet that felt right. It felt like peace, my peace. I had just sat down with my laptop to catch up on some emails when I heard the car pull into the driveway. The sound of tires crunching on gravel made my stomach twist, but I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't move from my spot on the couch as I listened to doors slam, footsteps pound up the walkway, and then the sound of Diane trying and failing to unlock the front door. She started banging on it immediately. Ellie, what the hell is going on? Why won't the door open? I let her bang for another 30 seconds before I stood up, grabbed the new keys from the counter, and walked to the door. I took my sweet time unlocking it, savoring the brief pause in her yelling. When I finally opened the door, I was greeted with Diane's furious face. Her hair was a mess, her face red, and she looked like she was ready to bite my head off. Behind her, Dad stood stiff and awkward, looking anywhere but at me, while Maya was hanging back near the car, her arms crossed and scowling. "What did you do?" Diane demanded, shoving her way past me into the entryway. "Why did you change the locks?" I stepped aside and let her storm in. Dad followed quietly, his shoulders hunched, avoiding my gaze, and Maya trailed after him, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. Diane turned on me immediately. "I want an explanation right now." I crossed my arms and met her glare without flinching. "It's pretty simple," I said. "This is my house. You don't live here anymore." Her mouth fell open like I'd slapped her. "Your house?" "Yes, my house, the house my mom bought, the house she left to me, the one you've been living in under a lie for the last 4 years. For a split second, the room went silent. Diane looked at Dad, her face full of confusion and growing anger. "What is she talking about?" Dad didn't answer. He just stood there, frozen. I turned to him, my voice sharp. "Tell her, Dad. Tell her the truth." Diane spun to face him. "What truth? What is she saying?" Dad mumbled something I couldn't hear. His voice was so quiet, I thought he might have been choking on his own guilt. "Speak up," Diane snapped. "What is she talking about, Richard?" Finally, he looked up, his face pale. "It's true," he said, his voice weak. "The house, it's not mine. It never was. Sarah bought it before we were married. She left it to Ellie in her will." For a second, Diane just stared at him, blinking as though she couldn't process the words. Then her face turned a deep shade of red. "You lied to me?" Dad flinched as though she'd struck him. "I didn't mean to." "You told me this was your house?" she shrieked. "You said you let Ellie stay here out of the goodness of your heart. Do you have any idea how stupid this makes me look?" Her voice was loud enough that I was sure the neighbors could hear, but I didn't care. Let her scream. Let her throw her tantrum. I had spent weeks feeling like a stranger in my own home. She could deal with a little reality. Diane turned back to me, her eyes blazing. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done for you." I cut her off. "Everything you've done for me." Like what? Trying to erase my mom from this house? Calling me a freeloader? Planning to throw me out? That's not helping. Diane opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't finished. "Your stuff is in the garage. Take it and leave." At that point, Maya finally spoke up. "Mom, let's just go." Her voice was quiet, and for the first time, I saw something other than anger. In her expression, embarrassment, maybe. She looked at me for half a second before turning away again. Diane ignored her. "We're not leaving," she snarled. "This is our home too." "No, it's not," I said, my voice steady. "It's mine, and I want you out." Dad finally stepped forward, looking like he wanted to fix everything with a single sentence. "Ellie, please," he said, his voice trembling. "We don't have anywhere to go. Right now, just give us a few weeks." I held up my hand. "No." His face crumbled. "Please, sweetheart. I know I messed up, but we're family. Family doesn't treat each other like this." I shot back. "You let this happen. You let Diane think this was her house. You let her treat me like garbage. And you stood there and said nothing." Dad had nothing to say to that. He just looked down at the floor like a scolded child. Diane, on the other hand, wasn't ready to give up. "You're a selfish little girl," she spat. "You think you're so high and mighty because of this house? You wouldn't even have it if it weren't for your father?" I laughed bitterly. My father had nothing to do with this house. Mom bought it with her own money before either of them were even part of the picture. She made sure it would be mine because she knew I couldn't count on him. That shut her up. I turned back to Dad. "You can take your stuff and leave. I'm done with this." For a moment, nobody moved. Diane stared at me like she wanted to lunge at me, but Dad finally nodded. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "Fine," he whispered. It took them about an hour to load their things into the car. Diane didn't stop muttering under her breath the entire time, calling me names and swearing about how ungrateful I was. Dad just looked hollow. Maya stayed quiet, helping carry things without a word. When they were done, Dad knocked on the door. One last time, I didn't open it. I watched from the window as they drove away, Diane's voice still faintly audible through the glass. The house was quiet again when they were gone. For the first time in years, it felt like it belonged to me, like it belonged to Mom. I sat down on the couch and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. They were gone. Finally, it's been 2 months since that day. Dad still tries to call from random numbers, but I don't pick up. Some relationships can't be fixed, and honestly, I don't want to. I'm focusing on myself now. My job is great. I've made friends at work, and I'm slowly healing from all of this. I planted new roses in Mom's garden once. She would have loved, and I'm finally at peace here. To anyone reading this who's dealing with toxic family, sometimes you have to let go. You don't owe anyone your peace, especially not people who take advantage of you. Mom made sure I'd always have a home.